Sciences program, which is what I oversee. And so basically, you have one program for the body, one program for the mind, and one program for spirit or consciousness. And they're all master's and doctoral level programs. And so essentially, the program I run is a science of consciousness program. But because I'm so interested in anomalous phenomenon, I'm interested in the phenomenon, in UAP studies, exo studies, all things paranormal and weird. We have a concentration in the program called anomalous studies, so people can kind of specialize in anomalous studies, and there's a variety of courses we teach as part of that. But the other big thing is in the classes, in the live classes, experiencers can talk about their experience, and they can use that as part of the conversation to support and understand each other's experiences, and to think about what kind of research or articles or books should I be exploring to connect to this topic. So it's a very experience-based, safe place to come together with other people who've had a wide range of experiences, some of which are UFO, ET related, some of which are just more kind of traditional paranormal. But as a lot of us know, it all kind of is connected, right? And this is my interest. It's like, how do we develop an integral approach to understanding the relationships between what historically have been thought of as very separate phenomenon, but I think increasingly, even just in the last few years, there's a lot of more recognition of like, no, this actually is all interrelated in some really fascinating way. And so that's what we're exploring, and it's really amazing.
Thank you so much. Speaking of, so for those of you just joining us, we are here now with Sean Esbjörn-Hargens, who's created the first PhD on the planet for exo studies. He's using an integral approach to understand it. We are also, I wanted to interject because you're talking about experiencers getting together and having conversations. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we have our monthly experiencer call where you get groups of 3. So it's not, you listening to someone talking, it's you with 3 other people for almost the whole hour. We have an experiencer come and then everyone connects, and you can do that at lightnet.org/connection. So Sean, you were saying, Alan, did you have a question before I give Sean a question here?
Because I loved your presentation when I saw you in New York about the anomalous overview, and I think we have to keep going deeper into anomalies, because are we really going to understand the world we're about to embrace, and that's embracing us? So do what Thomas Kuhn said, in the study for scientific revolutions, like embrace anomalies and learn the next level of what reality really encompasses. So that's really, I'm really interested in what you have to say. So yeah, go ahead, Zinka.
Yeah, how do you think it's all connected? You were just talking about it. What do you think is the, you have a lot of theories, 14 or so theories about why ETs are here. Well, what's your take on it?
Man, there's so many considerations, right? And I think this is why, and I'm also, in addition to the doctorate program, which we've been talking about, next month, beginning of the month, I'm launching a new public program for a 6-month community of practice to go into exo studies foundations, and so that's the name of the course. And in that course, we're going to be exploring 15 core concepts that I've been developing in the context of exo studies. And Chester's been there from the beginning, who I see in the audience here, and helping me and others to kind of think through these concepts. And so why I in part laughed when you asked that is because in trying to answer that question for myself, I had to, basically engage those 600 books you mentioned, right? So I created this bibliography of like, what are all the main books one has to have some relationship with? It doesn't mean I've read all of them. I have read many of them, most of them maybe even, but it's kind of like, how do we even start to get our minds and hearts around this at a galactic level? And so I dove into all this literature from all these domains, over 150 different academic disciplines when I added it all up, and I put it in an appendix in my Our Wild Cosmos, article. And kind of what's happened over the last 3 years as I've been deeply engaged in this process with a community of experiencers that have been kind of part of my programs and courses is trying to figure out how do we create a framework, how do we create the distinctions to talk about this, right? Because it feels like we don't have the right concepts and distinctions and words and language. Like we need kind of a whole new system to be able to have the right conversations, right? Because I just found we were having the same old conversations and we are just kind of going in a loop. It was kind of like, wait a second, this is so massive and so mysterious and so amazing. Like we need to kind of develop a whole kind of new integral approach to engaging and dancing with the phenomenon. And so this course that's coming up and starting in April, and I've developed these 15 concepts, these core concepts of exo studies. And so in a sense, it's like, I'm just at this point where I realize like, we have to like develop this whole new kind of language to talk about it. And so you can go to exostudies.org and then go to the course page and you'll see these 15 concepts laid out, or I can even share a screen at some point if that's helpful and show you. And as you read those, I think a lot of you will really resonate with the different concepts. And a lot of them are, oh yeah, there we go. So yeah, if you go to courses, there, click on there. And then right there, so yeah, beginning there, there's like metadisciplinarity, taking things seriously, holding them lightly, Our Wild Cosmos, galactic posthumanism, right? Extraterrestrials and meta-persons, right? A big tent for a paranormal party. Leaving Magnolia, right? So Jacques Vallée helped us get a passport to Magnolia, but actually we're now at the point where we need to leave it, right? And so what does that mean, right? Mutual enactment dynamic, multidimensional embodiment. One of the things that really connects all of this, and it's contained here in this idea of multidimensional embodiment, is we have multiple subtle bodies. And those multiple subtle bodies give us access to multiple inner senses that give us access to multiple realms and layers of the multiverse, right? Because this phenomenon is occurring on so many different dimensions, so many different aspects of the multiverse, that cultivating our own integrated embodiment where we activate these subtle bodies and their inner senses plays a big role with the phenomenon. And then this notion of doubleness, like the phenomenon is always this combination of paradoxes. And so how do we make sense of that? Wild being, reality is multiple, withdrawn, fluid, participatory, ontologically weird, indeterminate, enacted, and mysterious, right? Like, so that's wild being. That's just describing the basic foundation of the cosmos. Then, meta-integrative post-materialist science of anomalous realities. Pollock's brush. So just as we need Occam's razor to kind of trim things down to the most simple explanation, when we're dealing with a phenomenon, sometimes we need to expand and make things more complex. As Mike Cleland points out, if it's weirder, it's truer, right? So Occam's razor doesn't understand that. So we need different ways of thinking about the methods we're using. And then the Gordian taboo knot just is exploring the 12 plus different kind of interlocking aspects of social reality that are reinforcing the taboo. And we often are wondering, why is there such a taboo around this? Well, when you look at the political, the educational, the economic, the sociological aspects, you can start to appreciate it. And then this idea of total realization is just kind of looking at how do we combine the mystical paths, associated often with the Eastern traditions, with the occult, magical, and hermetic paths associated with the Western esoteric traditions, for a total, experience of realization. And then imaginal gnosis, like how do we cultivate our own capacity to know and discern and discriminate across these experiences. Right. So thank you, Zenka, for showing that. So you can see it covers a lot of ground. And like to try and answer that question you asked me of like, how is it interconnected? Right. Like I had to come up with 15 different concepts that are kind of highlighting different aspects. Right. And maybe as we as a community keep working through those concepts, we might distill it down to, 3 or 4 key ones. But I'm kind of in this divergent process where it's like, we're having to just really throw the net wide. We're having to really consider a lot of different aspects of the phenomenon. We don't want to necessarily exclude anything, which is why when it comes to trying to answer the question, who are they? Who are these beings that are visiting us? I have identified over 20 viable hypotheses as to who or what they might be, right? Extraterrestrials, extra dimensionals, us from the future, breakaway civilization, demonic beings, it just goes on, right? And so how do we make room for that variety? Because it's likely all of those do explain some of the types of beings we are encountering in this context, right? And so there's so much literature, there's so many different experiences, and there's so many strong opinions. And it's like these strong opinions have kind of gotten into loggerheads with each other. And I'm trying to just open it up and just say, hey, let's listen to each other, let's learn from each other, and let's kind of, just try and take seriously all these possibilities, even while holding lightly, realizing that some might be more true or more appropriate in certain contexts than others. But right now we're at the beginning of the mystery, right? We're just starting to try and come to terms with the magnitude of this. And so we just have to have open hearts, open minds, and open bodies in order to start to kind of piece together what is a new language, what is a new way, what is a new way of talking about this, what's the new ways of researching this. One of the things we're doing in the doctoral program is inventing new methodologies to research this and to work with experiencers in exploring this. So I'm launching this year a new research project, in large part inspired originally by the free research that Ray Hernandez did and his team, and looking at anomalous cognition and super experiencers. So people like Chris Bledsoe, right? And I've talked with Chris a number of times, and it's like, what is it about Chris that allows him to experience such a wide range of phenomenon, right? And so also looking at the work that Gary Nolan has done with brain imaging and going, oh, maybe the basal ganglia has something to play with, the experience of the phenomenon. And if certain practices allow us to cultivate the basal ganglia and make it hyper-connected, that then enables us to perceive and experience and interact with the phenomena. And maybe some people are born with a hyper-connected basal ganglia, or maybe initial contact starts a process where that hyperconnectivity begins to take place over several years, right? Because often when we have an encounter with the phenomenon, then it just increases over time, right? More and more experiences start to occur. In fact, Gary Nolan's agreed to be an advisor to the program. I'm also teaming up with the John Mack Institute, looking at their database and exploring other, groups of data on experiencers so that we can really design the process of this research, having experiencers weigh in on what are the kinds of questions we should be asking ourselves. What kind of survey would we do? What kind of in-depth interview would we do? How might we engage in the, brain imaging in a way that's non-reductive and non-dismissive, but helps us understand and answer some questions around, what makes experiencers unique, what happens to the brain and the body as the result of encounters, right? These are very fascinating and important considerations. So there's a lot happening, and it's great to be here to share it with you all and to, engage and just see what your questions are.
Yeah, speaking of that, if you guys want to ask questions, you can go to lightnet.org/unlimited, and that will get you back into the Zoom with the other people here, where we're going to bring you on so you can ask questions.
I think about that website you showed us under resources. Where under resources was that list of the 15 points that you brought up?
The 15 points are under courses. So 6-month course, Exo Studies Foundations.
And if you go, the website is exostudies.org. That's how you get there. Yeah.
Out of all those 15 points, the one that really stood out as the one that I think is the most interesting to pursue is the imaginal aspect.
Right.
Don't understand what the imaginal realm is. It's not the imaginary. It's actually, and I talk about this in remote viewing, it's actually a cognition that we're capable of developing. And I think for me, a lot of the answers to Zinka's question lies in the imaginal realm. When we really understand that, we'll understand, my theory, the connection to the others. What do you think, Sean?
I totally agree with that. And that's a big reason why I focus on the subtle bodies and the inner senses, because the subtle bodies and the inner senses connected to them are what in large part give us access to the imaginal realm, right? And when we visit and explore the imaginal realm, we're usually doing it in a state of consciousness or in a subtle body that is able to, engage and explore that space. And because one of the things I notice in my own experiences and looking at the experiencer literature is how often people describe energy, how after an initial encounter, their psychic capacities get activated, or they have a Kundalini experience, or they walk into a room and the light bulbs bust out, or their watch battery drains out, or the phenomena itself, like the phenomena is extremely electromagnetic in its energetic expression. And so our own electromagnetic dimension, our subtle bodies, our subtle energy system is the interface with the phenomenon. It's even like telepathy. Most encounters with the phenomena, involve telepathy more than like vocal speech, right? And telepathy is another example of this imaginal space and these subtle realms and these subtle perceptions and these modes of consciousness that go beyond the physical. And so I absolutely agree, Alan, that I think the imaginal is kind of a really core layer to understand and explore, because it really is the unlocking to so much of the phenomenon, because I think most of the phenomena occurs essentially in the imaginal realm. And we think we're in the physical realm, but we're actually in this blended space of the imaginal realm interpenetrating with the physical realm. And we're mistakenly assuming it's just physical, when in fact we're kind of like literally in two worlds at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. That needs to be developed throughout all the anomalous studies, even what Gary Nolan is doing, because I think there's an imaginal cognition, which is why remote viewing works. It's actually a cognitive feature of this other sort of non-physical, but it is physical. It's like that doubling thing that is the paradox of what we understand. So, but excellent. I love everything you're doing. So happy. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and we are starting to put the pieces together because we have all this equipment to actually I'm working with a device right now that can put my brain in a certain frequency specifically, so using electromagnetic fields. And we know with the radio research that they love radios. We were using a phone the other day to do it, and they were talking through the phone, but they're like, no, we like the electromagnetics of the radio better. So what is your theory or your thoughts on the fact that they might be time travelers? I know when we did this quiz with the LightNet team before, that was like the number one answer.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's one of the areas that comes up, that I talked about, that we went over in that list, is doubleness. And there's three major types of doubleness that show up over and over again. One is the inside and outside, or mind and matter, subjective and objective. That seems to get mashed up, right? And so, synchronicity is a good example of how something that's happening inside me seems to also be happening outside me. And I can't tell the boundary between inside and outside, like it's somehow kind of co-arising and co-influencing these domains. So the inside-outside boundary is one. The other is self-other, where who I am and what they are, that boundary starts to get blurred, right? And people have experiences of, themselves being ET. They have experiences of, like channelers often will experience channeling their own essentially future self, right? And so there's a lot of moments in the phenomenon where, we'll have an encounter with, even like people who report interacting with hybrid children, right? On the one hand, it's very other, it's very alien, it's very different, it's very scary. And yet there's also this immediate experience of that's me, that's my child, that's part of me. And it's confusing, right? Because it's kind of, there's like extreme difference, but there's also this felt sense of sameness, like that I'm connected somehow, right? So there's a lot of ways in which the self-other boundary also gets mashed up. Right. And so, sometimes people experience the grays as the human race at a different time point coming back and communicating with us and interacting with us, right? Or people will even have encounters where a very human looking person will essentially say they're from another timeline and, blah, 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 so there's a lot of examples in the literature that point to this. And so I think, and we even just, one of the U.S. congressmen from Tennessee, I think it was, Tim, forgetting his last name, but he even went on record recently saying, just I think it was in February, saying that he thinks a third hypothesis is it's us from the future coming back with new tech, right? So to have a U.S. congressman go on record with this extreme hypothesis is super exciting, right? And there's so many different kinds of encounters, and there's so many different types of beings that are being encountered. I think we have to make room for the possibility that some of them are time travelers, and maybe a majority of them. They might not all be ourselves from the future, right? They might be ET beings from the future, but are not us, right? Like it seems likely both types of scenarios are viable, but it also raises a question like, why do we really evolve into grays? Like that's a really interesting consideration. And is it because of the hybrid programs or something else? So I just think it raises all these fascinating questions, but we have to remain open to the possibility that some of these encounters are actually us from the future. And then what are the implications of that for ourselves in this moment?
Yeah. So before we talk about what you think is going to be happening in the next couple of years, I wanted to ask you just deeply why you're doing this. Like, what did you have an experience, or why has your whole life centered around this topic?
Yeah, I did have a series of experiences, and I continue to. I think of myself as a micro experiencer. I haven't had like the big kind of classic, experiences that just kind of change your life in a single moment, or over a couple day period. But I've through my meditative practice, through the different traditions I work with spiritually, I've had a series of encounters with non-human intelligences. And as I tried to make sense of that and explore that, it became obvious to me that some of them seemed to be galactic in nature. And so that really started to open me up to kind of the ET topic, which I'd always been interested in and open to, but I didn't have like an experiential basis from which to really consider that, possibility. And I just, it just feels like I'm just following the unfolding of my soul. I'm just like, I'm finding myself a place in life where I would have never imagined that I would be here. I never would have imagined I would be, kind of trying to pioneer new ways of thinking and talking about, what I call exo studies. And so for me, the very fact that I'm in a situation that I would have never imagined for myself is in some ironic way a sign that I'm on the right path. Right? It's not like it was pre-planned. It's not like I thought, hey, this would be cool. It's kind of like I've been kind of kicking and screaming the whole time. Like, really? I have to talk about this in public? Like, oh my gosh, like, what are people going to think? So, there's a lot of that goes on, at the same time. But at the end of the day, my soul wins out. My soul is saying, Sean, talk about this. Sean, explore this. Sean, offer a course, see who shows up, right? So, in that sense, I really feel it's the guidance that's coming from them, that's coming from my higher self, that's coming from, any other layers and aspects of the multiverse. And so it's really in a humble and open, like totally surprised and amazed way that I find myself here. It's just kind of like, wow, who would have ever guessed? Not me, right?
And you have people from all over the world coming to your courses. What happens to the people that take this 6 months course?
Yeah, well, Chester, you're going to have to weigh in here too. But I'll say a couple things. I think one of my kind of gifts, Zinka, is I have this big brain, this big mind. I read a lot, I study a lot, like I'm interested in learning as much as I can. So I'm just like a real, like kind of intellectually driven. At the same time, I have a really big heart, and I really want to have intimate conversations with people. I want to be in direct contact with reality. I want to cry. I want to hug. I want to just meet people where they're at. I want to hear their stories. I want to make spaces that are safe for them to talk about weird experiences they've had, right? And then I'm really embodied. I love the body. I love moving. I love dancing. I love somatic work. I love experiencing my body somatically, and just working through shame and self-image and all of that. Like, I'm just interested in just like, what does it mean to be in a body? And so I think bringing these three kind of qualities together creates a really unique kind of experience for the people who join my courses, because it's very kind of heady in some respects. It's very philosophical. It's very kind of intellectual, but at the same time, it's very heart-based. It's very much about, let's connect, let's talk, let's share notes, let's try and understand each other, let's be respectful, let's be curious. And then it's also about, let's stay grounded, let's be in our bodies, and no matter how far out in the cosmos we go, let's not leave our bodies behind. And it's also partly why I'm so interested in the subtle body work, because for me, that's just another way of being embodied, not just in our physical bodies, but in our subtle bodies. And so by having kind of this unique combination of who I am, it creates this experience where people who come in who are more intellectually connecting with the topics and the phenomenon, they then discover their heart in the process, right? And they discover they have a body, right? And then people who kind of come into the course more in a heart-based way and maybe haven't spent so much time thinking intellectually about these topics, then they find a lot of benefit and value of doing that and appreciating being able to do that in a predominantly heart-based space, right? So it's this real integration of kind of heart and mind and body. And I think the phenomenon wants that, right? The phenomenon is asking us, right? Like, it's presenting us with so many paradoxes, like we just can't get our mind around it, right? And they're trying to cultivate a humanity that can meet them in love, right? And we have to come to terms with being physical beings that also have the capacity to explore and travel beyond that, through our subtle bodies and through remote viewing and so forth, right? So it's not surprising that there's this integral kind of mix, in a course that I do, because I've spent my whole life exploring and experimenting with how to create educational and experiential and theoretical spaces to meet each other in authentic ways. And so with that, Chester, I'd love if you would maybe share a little bit about your experience of being a participant in this journey alongside me.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to. When I found your course, it was in a moment of need, kind of a moment of crisis, and I felt something coming forth in me, but it didn't have any direction. And so I then discovered your course, and because I have a little bit of a background in the integral stuff and Ken Wilber, and I went that route for a while, I embraced it rapidly. And so then I entered your course, and I was just totally blown away. How, especially with the starting document of Our Wild Cosmos, it's a very wonderful document. And I imagine it has a further evolution in its future. It's still 49 pages, but I know there's a part 2 coming, because this thing keeps expanding. And Sean's personality and his energy, and just come on. I mean, it's just love. This guy is just like a big teddy bear. People I know that have met him in person, that's how he feels to them, and that's how he comes across in the course. And yet also what he does in the course is he lights the fire a lot and sets the stage, but then we all jump in and we're all participatory. And since it's all over the place, I felt this freedom and wonderfulness to kind of explore my own inner, because it is just mine. Quadrant, what is it, 1, top left. And I deeply went into that. And then I discovered some tangents and rabbit holes, and I went down in them, and they got really dark and deep. And fortunately, I emerged mostly from that, and I've embraced working with Sean again, because he got this new course, perfect timing. I encourage everybody that really Let me say the greatest takeaway is further transformation, very much further transformation, really feeling that connectedness. His principle, or one of the concepts, is of doubleness, was introduced in his first course. Very, very important. And that difficulty in sometimes being in this world and the outer world same time. My primary CD, I guess you would say, is I'm either a target of or a generator of synchronicity in a massive way. And I've found how to utilize that capacity or capability to be able to explore deeper and deeper and deeper into my inner self. And so through this, I encountered, I would say, number one, this mirror, this conscience. It feels very female to me. I don't know. It feels like maybe my mother, or that kind of divine feminine conscience. And then simultaneously, or soon after, I really started discovering my higher self. And so it's almost like I'm embracing this symbol of the Trinity as me and the divine feminine, and this higher self, more masculine, me being male. And anyway, it's all come together, and I'm really operating. I think the one of the gifts I got out of it is how important my attitude is, that I have control over my attitude. And like Sean's energy and the folks in the course and everything are really positive folks. And so that really helped me raise my energy, but understand the personal responsibility I have in continuing to develop that energy and bring it forth and bring it forth. So I'm all about positivity, enthusiasm. I know our world kind of seems weird if you pay attention at all to this, like, the media or anything like that. You can really get, or I could really get upset and depressed and feel a little hopeless and everything. But that's almost like a mosquito now that's biting me every once in a while when some of that crosses my path, and instead I just focus on continuing to maintain that attitude of gratitude and attitude of positivity and attitude of enthusiasm. So anyway, there's a wrap.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Chester, for sharing your experience. I've had the same experience. Sean, the ETs picked you for a reason. You're very high vibe. You live your truth. You have this beautiful family. You've had this beautiful work in the world, and you do create that safe space where everyone can be curious. And then you're offering it for $495 for 6 months and meets
Right.
twice. So
Yeah,
it's just like a no-brainer, come when you can and be involved in it, and be with other people who are also asking these, how do we see these angles, right? What is the angle? And that's really latent too. I mean, we believe that not one person has the right angle. We have to actually come together to be like, what's your angle? My angle is this. Okay. And together we kind of come up with the picture. Alan has a question for you, and I do too. And then I think we're going to open it up to the group here. So again, if you're watching online, you can go to lightnet.org/unlimited. That will put you into the Zoom.
Yeah, Sean, I appreciate the way you've laid it all out and broken down sort of what we're up against. We're up against an old way of viewing reality. I think you get to it with this idea of doubleness. How is it possible that there's a subject and object, and that object is impinging on the subjective experience, and the subjective experience is then projected out as an objective reality outside of us, so, and that happens with UFOs. Like I saw something in the sky, and it looked like there was a little blue light coming out of the ship, and I said to myself, did I see a little blue light? And it did it again. It's like it was in my head. And lots of people talk about this merging of subject and object, yet the old paradigm has put something in the way. It's like a big boulder in the way that doesn't allow that merging of this new, like the way to the future is the resolving of paradox. So we have this exterior, and then how do we get beyond this purposeful split, and in order to the paradoxical views to really get deeper into the truth? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that just really stood out to me as I really started to study the phenomenon, is just how it undercuts consistently all these binary categories we have of mind and matter, self and other, past and future. And it really, and I think Jeffrey Kripal says it really well when he says the anomalous are non-dual signs. These anomalies are signs of the non-dual nature of reality, right? And so they're reminding us, the phenomena is reminding us of this deeper order of interconnectedness that then, as we try and navigate it in our 3D bodies, like it naturally kind of appears as subject and object or self and other, but that at another layer, it's not, right? These things are fully implicated in each other. And so it's like this kind of wonderful reminder of the kind of non-dual nature of reality. And it's so curious that the anomalous phenomenon have been so discarded and ignored by even like consciousness researchers, even by like transpersonal psychology, right? So like it's so curious to me that so many different fields of study that you would just think would naturally be drawn to the anomalies, because as you pointed out, Alan, Thomas Kuhn highlights that anomalies are what allow the new paradigm to emerge, because it's like they can't fit into the current explanatory framework, and so it forces, so if anything, we should be the most curious about the anomalous, right? Because it's this reminder that we don't have a map that includes everything, right? And so and I think that's part of what's being birthed is we need a new cosmology. We need a new story of how we understand ourselves in relationship to the multiverse. And I think the indigenous cosmologies have a lot to offer in terms of how we might, rethink that. And obviously the quantum sciences do too. So yeah, it's an exciting new story. Have a front row seat and are helping to craft.
Yeah, that's right. We always say you're front row seat to the evolution of humanity, and we're in that exponential curve right now. And I wanted to talk to you about that before we open it up to questions. So, what in your crystal ball? Mm-hmm. Not only are you seeing that's going to happen in the next between now and 2027, what do you hope would happen? So we can talk about both things, but let's start with your ideal scenario. What do you hope happens as we bring this into the 3D physical world?
Yeah, so one way that I've kind of approached this is I have been, making a list, a document that has all these key dates and, things that have happened on those dates over, and particularly over the last 5 years. And, essentially starting with, the New York Times article on December 16th, 2017, right, with Leslie Kane. And then what's interesting when I don't pretend that I have everything on the list. I know there's a lot of other things that could be added, but I've really made a concerted effort to have lists, key books that have been published, key documentaries that have been published, key articles that have come out, key podcast interview quotes, just like some of the core moments that I feel are really pointing and contributing to this momentum that's happening. And what's interesting, and this is a document that I have posted in the Slack space of the course, and if you look at December 16th, 2017, basically the year after, right? So that was right at the end of 2017. In 2018, there's really only like 2 or 3 notable things that happened that year. So basically it's crickets, right? Totally silent. Like everyone's just like, what? The next year, 2019, we have basically 6 items that are really notable. And these were pretty notable items, right? The Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies hosts their first conference. The Navy drafts new guidelines for UAP reporting. The New York Times comes out with their article interviewing 5 Navy pilots. Lou Elizondo admits in an interview with Tucker Carlson that the U.S. government has debris from ET craft. And then interestingly, President Trump goes on record in June basically saying he doesn't believe in UFOs. And then the U.S. Congress begins to receive their first round of classified briefings on UFOs that have happened, in a long time. So that happens in 2019. When we get to 2020, 17 things happen, right? So we go from 2 to 6 to 17. 2021, we have 53 items I've documented. 2022, even more. And already this year we have 24, right? So you're seeing this exponential activity. And, and there, when you go through the list and you look at the quotes, I'm mostly pointing to like the military, personnel going on record, U.S. Congressperson saying things, really key books and documentaries. And so it's all very mainstream. It's still not getting into the consciousness stuff so much, right? That piece still isn't really part of the conversation on this larger scale. But I'm not discouraged by that because we're doing that. We're having that conversation. And these two trajectories are basically going to come together, right? But what it does show, and Chester pointed me to a recent podcast video that Stephen Bassett did, where he's kind of predicting, that basically, over the next 6 months, buckle your seatbelts, like all these things are in motion behind the scenes, and the government's basically laying down the infrastructure for the president to come out and admit basically a non-human intelligence presence that is on this planet interacting with us, right? And so my hope is that, yes, within the next year or maybe 2 years, that we get a U.S. president to basically go on record confirming, ET in one way or another. Because I think what we see with the New York Times article, just as like an analogy, it started to open the floodgates. And we see this exponential growth of people engaging. And, even if you just look at the blogs of Christopher Mellon's blogs, read those. They're stunning. They're important. Like, they're examples of a really smart person pushing the Congress to ask the really tough, good questions about the phenomenon. Still from a predominantly military, national security, airplane safety perspective, but he's doing that for a reason, and he's putting into that process, some real, powerful questions, and so and even with Leslie Kean's recent 5-part docuseries coming out with National Geographic, it's not getting into the paranormal. It's not getting into the anomalous so much. It's not getting into all the weird, cool, interesting stuff. But it's laying the cultural groundwork for more people to come out and share their experiences, for people who have never considered this to start to consider it. So I think there's a big education gap. I mean, I think this is part of the work that we all have as ambassadors to the phenomenon, is how do we educate our family and friends who are maybe open to some of this, but haven't really considered it or don't know how to talk about it, or they've had a few experiences, but they're just kind of ignoring them, right? So I really imagine that over the next few years, we're going to have a U.S. president confirm ET, and then that's going to enable countries and governments around the world to start to have a more open conversation about what they know and their own sense of it. And I think there's going to be some freak out. I don't imagine us moving into discovery and disclosure without some social cultural meltdown. Like any scenario I imagine, there's going to be some major existential angst, right? So I think it can be a bumpy ride. I'm at least open and prepared for it not always looking that pretty. I think it's going to take us many years to kind of integrate this. And there are always, because we live in a highly fragmented and highly digital culture, there's always going to be parts of society that are totally out of lunch on this. I have no idea, deny it, ignore it, right? It's like we're in this post-truth era. So it's going to be a very interesting process of like, how do we communicate these realities? Even, high D, HD, film and photographs, people just say, oh, it's Photoshop. Nah, it's just Photoshopped, right? So it's going to be interesting. I think the polarization is going to increase. I think it's going to be a challenging period, but I think we're in it. I think it really in the next, I think Steve Bassett's a little optimistic, though I absolutely hope he's not. But I think in the next 1 or 2 years, it's going to get very interesting, and it might even be in the next 6 months, right? It's absolutely possible in the next 6 months, we're going to have some major things happen, in part because if you look at the legislation that Biden signed at the end of December, right, that provides the whistleblower protections, that if we really start having those individuals coming forward and giving classified briefings behind closed doors to Congress, Congress has already showed that they're taking this very serious, right? And they just funded Arrow, the first year of operating budget for Arrow, $62 million. Hello. It was a big deal when ATIP had $22 million behind the scenes. We're now publicly upfront giving Arrow $62 million for its first year of operations, right? So like, this is big news. Like, you know, my fear, one of my fears is that the mainstream materialist narrative is going to turn this topic into a flesh and blood, nuts and bolts ET presence. And I fully believe that's a part of this process and part of the presence. But I think what we're dealing with is so much more interesting and creative and dynamic than that, that I worry about the narratives basically trying to get rid of the interdimensional and the paranormal and the, you know, kind of all the weirdness, you know, and the high strangeness, because I think that's actually where we need to go to actually be in right relationship with reality. You know, it's like reality screaming at us that it's much weirder than we're willing to acknowledge, right? So I think the sooner we can acknowledge that on a larger scale, the better, right? You know, so I think there's going to be narrative wars, you know, spin doctors, cultural wars, but it is very interesting that the topic, the UAP topic in the congressional context has been bipartisan. This is very fascinating to me, that there has been strong bipartisan support and leadership, right? And I think Steve Bassett's right. The next US president is going to probably be the disclosure president. And so hopefully we're going to pick wisely when it comes to that, because, you know, even though in many ways the US president is just a figurehead with actually not a whole lot of power, and they really haven't been in the loop much at all when it comes to this topic, I think America, you know, unfortunately, just because of the, you know, political military might we have, is going to play a leading role with this at a global scale, right? I think those power dynamics are shifting, but I think for the foreseeable few years, America's still in the driver's seat. So it's really important that we do this in a way that makes it more possible for more countries and governments to come forward and be part of the disclosure discussion.
Yeah, you know, thanks to Alan, we actually did an interview, a really in-depth interview with Stephen Bassett from the Paradigm.
Oh, great.
And, you know, I love how he called how this is going to happen. You know, it's the president first, then it's open contact.
Right.
You know, and I've been loving like that in my brain of thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be at parties with ETs. Like I'm going to
right. Star Wars bar.
It will, like literally, you know, it will be like that. I mean, some think they'll be in like sort of a, not concentration camps, but like separated, segregated for a little while, but like eventually, right? So, and you know, as you're, you know, talking, I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, we're always like, we want it now, like now, let's disclosure now. But you're right. Like this is going to be for some people. I mean, most of the population already, you know, more people believe in ETs than God, which is really, really wild to think that. So, but still, there is going to be that angst that you talk about. And so maybe we get to be grateful that this top is being like unscrewed gradually, right? So that, you know what I mean? It's like we always want faster and faster, but the government, they want to disclose. They just want to do it in a calm way. So we get to be loving and patient about it, because, you know, Stephen Bassett made an interesting point. You know, if we're just like, you guys lied to us and, you know, all this stuff, which they did, which is really harsh because we're, you know, I mean, free energy, all stuff, you know, it's like, we're in the Stone Age, you know, kind of thing. But he says, if we're kind, we're going to go further, faster.
Yeah. It's a beautiful.
So, and we're also, not going to be fueling a fear narrative through the world. You know what I mean? So, because what the aliens were 20 years ago is not what they are today. Just like I'm not the same, you know, no one's the same. We are all one thing. We're one thing. So there's a part of us that are jerks, and that part of us is getting less. So we get to really like do what you do in your classes with this whole disclosure process. And we get to say like, all right, man, this is what happens and what do we want to happen in the future. So this next 6 months, that would be really cool. And I just want to we're going to open it up for questions. Pauline has her camera on, which is perfect. But I just want to encourage all the musicians out there to write songs. Like when we have angst and confusion, like hit the guitar, man. I also want to tease out, we will be releasing Stephen Bassett's interview soon. It's in the edit bay right now. And one of the proposals that we came up with together during the interview is to create a reverse protest system. So, because that was one of his strongest points, was he said, look, this is bipartisan. We've got the election coming up. Both sides want disclosure, and all people want disclosure, the Bassett. So this is a great thing to run on because
Right.
So we decided that, and I asked him, who are the Congress people that and the journalists who've really taken one for the team? Just like you said, you're like, I can't believe I have to talk about this. This is, you took one for the team. And now you've legitimized, just like Avi legitimized this in academia. Thank you. You know what I mean? So we get to thank you on Twitter. We get to thank you on Facebook. We get to thank you on, you know what I mean? And so we're going to start a list of all these people that came out in Congress and be like, we'll tweet thank you. No, you know what I mean? Instead of protesting, encourage, and other people will hopefully follow suit. So we can be clever about this, I think, and really get the ball rolling.
Totally. Yeah, people are
aliens too. So I mean, it's like you just look to the next generation, is not a big deal.
Yeah, people are realizing that, and will continue to realize that this is happening, and they're going to want to be on the right side of history, and they're going to start coming out with their own quotes. And I think it's an interesting that more and more people are kind of coming forward with kind of a pro ET orientation and kind of going on record with that, because they don't want to be, there's this quote when, we had the Future of Our Space, that event where Haynes, used the word extraterrestrially, really famous moment. Well, in that same event, Jeff Bezos, in which I now say Bozo because of what he says there, he says, I don't think there are ETs here. If there were, we would know about it. And it's just like, okay, that's going to haunt him forever. It's like, when this all goes down over the next couple of years, people are going to pull out that quote and go, Jeff, are you serious? So I think more and more people are going to try and avoid, being Jeff Bozo. And,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And I always saw that too. I always saw it being, all the penguins, on the thing, which is originally why I was trying to track all this stuff. I'm like, people don't want to talk about this now because there's shame or whatever, but pretty soon it's going to be the penguins lining up on that edge, and they're all going to not want to be left behind. And so this is the most exciting, most Renaissance-based galactic narrative we've ever had. I mean, this will cause a renaissance in healing, technology, exploration, curiosity, fashion, everything. It's going to be so fun. Pauline, welcome. Go ahead and ask your question. If anybody else here has a question, you can raise your hand in the reactions, and I'll pull you down in.
Hi, Pauline.
Okay. Hi, Sean. And I'm so glad you followed your purpose, because we sure need it. We need that. Okay, talking about, I'm a newbie, but I've been in LightNet and I did the radios, which is awesome. I'm first level, okay, and about UFOs, but I'm just so excited about it. What I wanted to say, what Alan was saying too, when I experienced this last couple of weeks, my first ship that I think I saw, I was kind of not sure if I was believing it. Right. So a disclosure for myself. Right. And what I experienced was the lights, and it was a telepathic request that I was asking, and it responded. So to me, it wasn't like a drone or anything like that. And it was darker, so it wouldn't be a drone. So my take on that, I had to get over the fear and the doubt. So it's like disclosing it to myself. Is this real? And you were talking about we have no place to come from, right, on first level. And that's why I'm seeking to know more. But the thing that a little bit scary for me, and that is the exchange of energies between what I saw and my energy, because there was a definite exchange being, I was asking I was asking for something and there was a response. So you know that there's a exchange. So I have to get over that fear of that exchange. And so my question is, and then my husband is not believing any of this. And so now I have to go over that hurdle.
Right.
When is he going to come along? And he's wondering, am I going cuckoo? My wife, I'm worried about my wife, I'm going, okay. So I want to continue the curiosity of this, and I don't want to stop. So once you get your foot in the water, you just want to go swimming. And so we're going to be like on first level. I mean, I feel like, we're just getting in on all that. And I feel like because I'm with LightNet, with loving people, that's a big plus, because like you're saying, that's how we're going to be able to make it not aggressive, because we went through the COVID with vaccine, not vaccine, the politics, Democrat, Republic. We don't want to be on opposite sides all the time.
Yeah.
It was too divisive. So anyway, I'm just trying to get myself in my own safe place. And I'm wondering about what you think about the exchange of energies.
Yeah.
That thing.
One thing that I experience and that I see over and over in the literature and in talking with experiencers is that the phenomenon, by and large, I mean, there always are exceptions, but the phenomenon and the various beings that are part of the phenomenon are very responsive and respectful to our boundaries when we communicate them, right? So I think it's really on us to claim our sovereignty and to communicate our boundaries, and when's enough, when's too much, what's okay, and just to remember to explain that, to communicate that telepathically, or just hold that as an intention, just and generally speaking, the phenomena will respect and respond to that and appreciate that. And so I think we just often kind of forget that we have that capacity, because sometimes the phenomena is so overwhelming and so mysterious and magnificent, and we just kind of like we just open in a way, we just kind of naturally open in the face of it, and then sometimes we just kind of close down in the face of it. But we can experiment with like, what's the right level of contact, interaction, communication. Stuart Davis has a great list of sovereignty, points around sovereignty on his work. So people are doing interesting stuff around helping us remind ourselves to claim our sovereignty. And then the other piece you mentioned is around, you had this experience, you're kind of doubting and wondering, your husband thinks you're going crazy potentially. Like, you're in really good company, because all of us are often having those moments. Even after having many experiences, with every new experience, I go through that cycle. Like, so it's not like, I'm just like, past that, and now I have experiences and I'm like, oh yeah, great, it's cool. Every experience I'm like, okay, what was that? Did I make that up? Did I want that to happen? How did I contribute to that? How do I discern what was them, what was me, right? And then part of what's hard is because of the doubleness. There's often a mixing of me and the phenomenon, right? There's not a clear like, oh, I'm over here and the phenomenon's there, right? There's these ways in which the energy or the telepathy or the synchronicities, it's like, and so that naturally makes it hard for us to orient in relationship to the phenomenon, because we're so used to objects and things being over there and at a distance, and us being over here, like, and when the phenomena is kind of mixing that up, and like we're hearing it in our mind, or there's energy coming into our body, or synchronicities are happening around us, then it's like, what's inside, what's outside, and that's confusing, and we doubt ourselves. And so being with others who are navigating that process is very helpful. I still, with many of my experiences, I don't have a final sense of, was it real, was it made up, was it true, was it not true? I orient that it most likely was true. It most likely was what it seemed it was. So I give it the benefit of the doubt, but there's a way in which I hold it lightly. Like maybe more information will allow me to make more sense or different sense of it, right? So I take it seriously, but I hold it lightly. And that I found really gives me a lot of sanity, right? Because when my interpretations start locking down on, oh, it was this or oh, it was that, then I find I end up actually giving away my power and not honoring the mystery of the phenomenon, right? So I had an experience where I experienced myself as a mantid being on a ship, and that I was kind of the scientist on the ship. Now, I can, drive myself crazy trying to figure out, am I really a mantid being on a ship right now? Is that really happening? Is that a parallel self? Or is that a past self? Or is that a future self? Or do I just have some kind of strong connection with a mantid being that is out on a ship and I mistook it as me because there's maybe a way in which there's just a deep emotional connection with that being? Like it could be any of those things, and it could be some other possibilities, right? And so I don't know which one to choose, but I had an experience. It was powerful. It raised questions, and I'm living those questions, and I'm trusting that there was some kind of contact with what I would consider a mantid being. Was that mantid being me? Was that mantid being a mantid being? Was that mantid being some other being that appeared to me as a mantid being, either because they wanted to appear as a mantid being or because I had that kind of filtering image in my own mind that had me view and connect to that being as a mantid being, right? I don't know, and I might not never know, but I don't have to deny the fact it was a powerful experience and something along those lines happened, and I can just hold it lovingly, and I can have other experiences, and I can see how those experiences either confirm or disconfirm each other, and over time I trust I will arrive to a deeper place of self-knowing. But right now I don't always have that self-knowing. I'm kind of left questioning
Yeah.
and wondering.
Oh, I thank you for that, because I get it. Just keep ourselves sane, and just try to be grateful for the experience and not
Yeah.
try to overthink it,
Yeah,
and allow
exactly.
it to happen again if it's meant to. When I'm ready,
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I totally resonate also. Thanks for your question, Pauline, because I think a lot of people have this question. I resonate also with the boundaries thing. I always just put the I do believe that in these two dimensions, there is an agreement about how this works, and we being incarnated here, we do have an upper hand, at least before they get here, you know what I mean? And I think we'll be mature enough to handle when they will. But I do believe personally that we get to, I don't want to experience that anymore. And that's okay that it's experienced in that way. And I'm requesting a different type of experience. So our intention is very powerful. And it's also easier to do this together, which is why we just had 100 people making contact in one weekend, because when your doubt comes in and you're like, wow, this feels so different, it's kind of scary because it's different. And what is actually going on? You have someone next to you going like, yeah, that was really weird. That meditation was cool. And this, like, what is it? You know what I mean? So we get to be curious with each other and loving, because, if this is consciousness, then we don't want to bring in all of our traumas and everything to this new narrative, because this new narrative, I mean, it's like to the peace treaty with like guns in your backpack still, it's like
I don't think it'll be allowed, Zink. It won't. That's what's stopping us from the new narrative, is by past holding us. So when we clear that, the road opens, the traffic clears, you're free there, smooth sailing. So that's what we're working through these next couple of months. This whole Pluto and Aquarius, if you buy that stuff like that, it clears the decks for something new to happen, I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alan, for being here with us today. I look forward to seeing you later at the conference. Alan has also arranged for an incredible interview on the 28th with Daryl Anka, who is going to be talking about his new escape room called the Keys to Destiny, which he's doing in LA. So that's on the 28th at 9 a.m. lightnet.org/unlimited gets you into that. It's a free event. And also tomorrow is free for you guys to come and meet each other. So if you're looking to find other like-minded people, every once a month on the third Saturday at 8 a.m. we get together, hang out, and you're more than welcome. That's lightnet.org/connection. And
Tap-
Sean,
What's your next thing, Sean? What are you working on besides your, PhD program?
Yeah, so the big projects are, the master's and doctorate program, the 6-month community of practice course that's starting in April.
yeah, let's talk about that real quick. Like, let's highlight that, because you guys, this starts in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's affordable. It's 6 months. You're going to be, I mean, talk about being with cool experiencers. These are like international people from all over the world. You're going to have the Slack chat to like talk. You're going to be able to go to listen to the things. You're going to be able to hang out with each other. And it's a very high vibe community. So exostudies.org gets you into that. And it's starting in 2 weeks. So now's really the time to jump on board.
Yeah, and next Thursday we're having a pre-course Zoom call so that folks at 8 p.m. Eastern, a chance just to connect. I'll be kind of describing some parts of the upcoming course. So as soon as you sign up and pay, you get invited into the Slack space, so you can immediately start connecting with people. And there's already threads and documents and links to all kinds of resources. The other thing that's really great about the community is I really want this place where all of me could be welcome. And I had this experience that when because I've been a practicing Orthodox Christian, that when I was with my Orthodox Christian friends, I couldn't talk about the fairy work that I do, right? And when I'm with my fairy tradition friends, I can't talk about the ET work that I do. And when I'm with my ET friends, I can't talk about the magic circles and witchcraft that I do, right? And when I'm with my integral friends, I can't talk about, and when I'm with my, it's just like, it's like whatever community I'm part of, there's other parts of me I can't talk about, right? And I was just going, this is crazy. Like I'm having to leave different parts of me at the door with whatever community of practice I'm part of. And so part of what's so great about this community is we have Christians, Buddhists, Marxists, atheists, witches, right? And what unites us is most of us have had weird experiences, and we're just open to hear about it and talk about it and try and make sense of it, right? And so there's a real range of diverse experiences. Some people have ET contact, some have abduction experiences, some just have psychedelic experiences, some work with nature spirits, some have had Bigfoot sightings, right? So it's just a whole range of anomalous experiences. And it's just a real eclectic group, and it's amazing. And yeah, we've really tried to price it at a very affordable rate. $4.95 is a steal for 6 months. And a lot of people are not able to come to every single call. We have 2 calls a week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday. So they might just come to one a week. They might not come to any and they just watch the recording. Or they might be super involved for a few months and then they travel with their family for a month and they're not involved. And then they just plug back in when their life settles down. So because it's 6 months, it really allows you to kind of weave it in and out of your life in a way that works for you. And a lot of people engage in a lot of different ways. So it's really flexible and it's a great community. We have a lot of fun. And we're going to be talking about all those concepts that are listed on that page that Zinka showed. So it's going to be fun, wild, weird, and amazing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate the work you're doing in the world. And I just want to shout out to Erica and Stone, some of our guys that are here, and Kyle Paget from Light Within You, who's been working on our publicity and producing the show. So big thanks to you, Kyle, for all that you're doing with LightNet. We appreciate you so much. And we'll see you guys tomorrow on the connection call. Have a great day. Thanks again, Sean. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.